Dr. Mark Westman, who has worked as a veterinarian at RSPCA, New South Wales. Okay, big round of applause for Shell again. Well done. She's got her own groupie table there. My apologies. Dr. Mark Westman worked as a veterinarian at RSPCA New South Wales for 5 years and senior veterinarian at AWL New South Wales for 4 years before returning to the University of Sydney to complete a PhD in feline infectious diseases. Mark is particularly interested in the diagnosis of feline retroviral diseases, FIV and FELV, especially in the shelter setting, where incorrect diagnosis can lead to unnecessary euthanasia of cats. Mark also helped found Pets in the Park, a national charity aimed at caring for pets owned by homeless people, and sits on the board for the Sydney Dogs and Cats Home. Will you please welcome Mark Westman?
Tough presentation to follow. Thanks, Shell. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a huge honour and privilege to be here. I've been sampling cats around Australia for the last 3 years and testing them for FIV and working out the best way to diagnose FIV in our cats. And the exciting bit of my research, which I'm sharing with you this afternoon, is that it should change the way we diagnose FIV in shelters, both here in Australia and overseas. And better still, what I'm suggesting this afternoon in terms of changing how we diagnose FIV will not only save your shelter money, but it's so easy to implement. So easy that it's easy to summarise in one simple slide, which of course I'll save right till the end. And these 3 cases here on your screen, Ash, Chaos and Ranger, are perfect examples of how what I'm suggesting with my recommendations, how easy they are to implement in cases that you'll be seeing every day. Before I start, I want to acknowledge my amazing supervisors, who some people will know from Sydney University, Associate Professor Jackie Norris and Professor Richard Malik. These guys are not only wonderful researchers, but they're also amazing people, and I am hugely indebted to them for looking after me. If you're interested in what I'm talking about this afternoon and you want to read the expanded version with lots more colourful tables and stuff, it's now available online. It's an open access journal, so anyone can Google it. If you just Google Westman, lots of people struggle with my surname. It's not Westerman, it's just Man from the West, Westman. 2015 FIV, you'll get this full article. It's open access, no journal fees. So to recap, most people here I'm sure will be familiar with FIV. Feline immunodeficiency virus is a virus that's transmitted mainly through fighting, so it's most common in outdoor cats, particularly male cats, but it can also be transferred through blood transfusions and also from mother to kitten. It's similar in structure to HIV, and this is particularly important for funding. So a lot of funding, particularly overseas, for FIV research comes from the fact that FIV can be used as a model for HIV disease. What FIV does to cats is a huge area of debate, and I don't have time to go into that today. Suffice to say that disease outcomes for FIV infected cats are variable. However, there's a pretty confirmed link that cats that are FIV infected are about 5 times more likely to develop lymphoma. So if I had a choice, if I had a cat and I could choose whether or not it was FIV infected or not, I would always choose for it to be uninfected. And finally, importantly, FIV is lifelong. Once a cat's infected, it has it forever. FIV is a worldwide virus. It's made up of 6 different subtypes, A through F, and in Australia we see mainly FIV subtype A. In terms of prevalence, I've got some data that I'll be putting out next year. Australia does really well in terms of having a very high prevalence for FIV, much, much higher than most other countries around the world. So I've tested over 2,000 cats and just over 300, so about 15% of these cats were FIV positive. These are client-owned, so pet cats with outdoor access older than 2 years of age. So without doubt, it's one of the most common infectious diseases we'll see in cats, and of course, see it regularly coming through our shelters. Overseas, in Europe and North America, it's more like a 3 or 4 or 5% prevalence. So we have a huge amount of FIV here, which makes Australia a great place to do FIV research. I'm going to go back for a second. I know there are some people here from Western Australia who won't like this bit, but in my research we did find a slightly higher prevalence of FIV on the west coast compared to the east coast. You can beat me up for it afterwards if you want. In terms of testing for FIV, the general recommendations, and these are based on some really good publications, the ABCD guidelines for infectious diseases, the American Association of Feline Practitioners guidelines. Basically, we should be testing all cats before adoption, as well as any sick cat and cats before they donate blood. So it's a thing that we should be doing regularly in our shelters. Testing in general for infectious diseases, the big orange blob is representative of a virus like feline immunodeficiency virus, and the green bits around the edge are antibodies. So sometimes in infectious diseases we'll be testing for the actual virus, so antigen testing, but for FIV we're looking at antibody testing, which is also called serological testing. In veterinary medicine, sometimes serological testing is not used and is not good. So for example in FIP, so feline infectious peritonitis, serological testing is bad and shouldn't be used. But for feline immunodeficiency virus, which is what I'm talking about this afternoon, FIV, antibody testing has been the way to go for a long time. And the reason is if you look at the green tealy sort of line, once a cat is infected, after an initial period of about 8 weeks while it's developing antibodies, after the 8-week period, it has a high level of antibodies for life. Like I said, FIV is a lifelong infection, so once a cat is infected, it's going to have these levels of antibodies for life. So we need to be looking for antibodies to diagnose. Conversely, the red line, which is the amount of virus the cat has in the bloodstream, drops and is low for a very long period of time. So looking for virus can be challenging in these guys, hence why we're looking at antibody testing. In 2002, and I love this bit of information, that the FIV vaccine, which is really controversial for lots of reasons, was released around the same time as a controversial tennis player last won Wimbledon. That was Leighton Hewitt. So in 2002, the vaccine was released in America, and 2004 in Australia. And it's been controversial for 2 reasons. One is that the efficacy of the vaccine, so how well it protects cats against FIV, is still unknown. There are no field trials on looking at how well FIV protects cats against contracting the virus. Secondly, FIV vaccination mucks up our diagnosis of FIV based on antibodies. So basically, a cat that is vaccinated with the FIV vaccine will produce antibodies that are indistinguishable from antibodies produced in natural infection. That's a mouthful. So to give you an understanding of how that looks in real life, this is an IDEXX SNAP FIV test on the right. That blue configuration, the 2 dots there, means that the cat is FIV positive, or this test kit, is a positive result. But without knowing more about that cat, if you don't know that cat's history, you have no idea of knowing if this cat is vaccinated against FIV, if it's infected with FIV, or if in fact it's both vaccinated and infected with FIV. So that test result doesn't really tell you anything, except that it has antibodies. And this is such a problem in diagnosing FIV that the world guidelines for vaccination at the moment suggest that we shouldn't be vaccinating against FIV because vaccination induces the production of antibodies indistinguishable from those developed in response to natural FIV infection. Therefore, it interferes with antibody-based FIV diagnostic tests for at least a year following vaccination. So we had this great system of diagnosing FIV based on antibodies that the vaccination is complicated. That's where this study that I'm doing has come in. So in Australia, we both have a lot of FIV and we also have some uptake of the FIV vaccine. So like I said, it's a great place to study this issue. And so my study looked at a whole stack of cats from around Australia, some that were vaccinated. This is the left-hand column. So these cats were vaccinated with the FIV vaccine. Importantly, it wasn't necessarily to the manufacturer's recommendations. So in a minute, I'm going to show you some cats that were both vaccinated and infected, but don't skip ahead and assume that that was due to vaccine failures. This is cats that had at least been vaccinated once, but not necessarily with the recommendations from the vaccine manufacturer. The ages were comparable. and the control group were cats that had never been vaccinated against FIV. So I tested 3 different antibody test kits. These are all kits that are available in Australia currently. They're about to be released, a couple of them are about to be released in North America. And the numbers are not too important at the moment. So we're looking at the Witness, the Antigen, and the IDEX kit. The numbers aren't as important except to know that they test for different antibodies, and that will become important in a second. So in all these cats, I did a range of antibody testing with these 3 different kits, and then also did PCR testing, which is currently used to diagnose FIV in vaccinated cats. So this was sort of one of our additional tests. And finally, we're so desperate to make sure that we had the most robust, best results possible that I even flew blood personally myself all the way to Florida. This is Janet Yamamoto, who's sort of the grandmother of FIV research, and hand-delivered blood. She could do some extra testing called virus isolation. I got back and showed some friends this photo, and they sort of joked that I was Gulliver visiting the little land of Lilliputs. So we're determined to make sure we had the best results we could. And this is a set of results that absolutely astounded us. So I'll go through them so you understand what's going on. But we would have expected that all of these cats in this slide would have tested positive with all 3 antibody kits. So based on our previous understanding, vaccinated cats produce antibodies that shouldn't have been able to be differentiated by these test kits. So on the left here, on the left-hand side of the screen, we have 5 cats that were both vaccinated and infected. And sure enough, all 3 test kits tested FIV positive. So in these kits are double tests that look for FIV and FELV. So what you're looking at is the top strip on the top 2 kits, and hopefully you can see a line, a second line in both those windows, and then the IDEX kit down the bottom, the 2 dots again means the cat was FIV positive. So that's what we expected. Infected cats should test positive like that. But on the right-hand side, this is the result that really blew us away. Out of 119 vaccinated cats, 108 of them had this testing configuration. So the antigen kit, which is up the top, and the Witness kit in the middle, 108 of these cats tested FIV negative. So we would have expected that none of these cats should have tested FIV negative, but 108 of them tested FIV negative. What that means, to look at it a different way, if you, let's say shelter 1 is the top grey line, they use the SNAP combo test kit. And let's say somehow magically these 119 cats were picked up and dumped at a shelter somewhere that did FIV testing before adoption. If this shelter was using the IDEX SNAP kit on these 119 cats, and they didn't know the vaccination history, all 119 cats would have tested FIV positive. If you're a shelter that doesn't rehome FIV positive cats, that's 119 euthanasias right there. If you're a shelter that does rehome FIV positive cats, there's 119 FIV positive cats that you're trying to rehome, which of course are much harder to rehome, and in fact most of them aren't FIV infected anyway to start with. If you're a cat that does, if you're a shelter that does follow-up testing, so secondary testing to confirm your first result, which is ideal, but obviously there's always money limitations, you're spending almost $6,000 on PCR testing to find out that only 5 of those 119 cats were actually infected. So what I'm suggesting this afternoon is if you're shelter 2 or shelter 3 that use the Antigen Rapid or the Witness kit as your first line test kit, with the Antigen Rapid kit, if you tested 119 cats, 114 of them would have been FIV negative. And you would push them straight through to adoptions. That's it, easy, next one. And you had 5 FIV positive cats to deal with. With the Witness kit, there were 6 false positives, so you would have had, out of 119 test kits, you would have had 11 positive results. And if you did secondary testing on that to confirm which ones are truly positive, you would have had to spend a tiny bit more money, but you're still only talking about 11 PCRs. So you can see it's a massive cost saving for these 119 cats. So another way to look at it, these are some real life examples that I've been involved with at the RSPCA in Sydney. This is a cat called Chaos, 6-month-old cat that came in. At this point in time, the RSPCA was using IDEX SNAP. and it tested positive. And there was just something not right about this test result. And so I asked for some extra blood and took it with me to uni. And sure enough, it tested negative with the antigen rapid and negative with the witness test kit. And just to be absolutely certain, I did PCR as well, and this cat was negative. And sure enough, when we worked really hard and delved through the history, this cat had been vaccinated against FIV a month earlier. But we had to do some work to find that out. And again, if we hadn't taken that extra step, this cat could have easily been classified as being FIV positive straight away. So I'm not suggesting that every cat needs this panel of 4 test kits. What I'm suggesting is that if the shelter had been using the antigen rapid or the witness test kit to start with, Chaos would have tested negative and this wouldn't have been an issue. Move on to the next cat. Ash actually came in with Chaos. Ash was is a 2-year-old, male cat. And he also tested positive on the SNAP kit. He looks like an FIV positive boy though. And so again, I asked for some extra blood to confirm this. So sure enough, he tested positive on the antigen rapid, the witness kit, and also the PCR kit, PCR testing. So this cat was both FIV vaccinated and FIV infected. And in fact, going through the history of where this cat had come from, he had been vaccinated before the vet had actually tested to make sure he was FIV negative. So he hadn't been done according to the vaccination guidelines. So this is not a vaccination failure. This is a cat that was vaccinated when he shouldn't have been vaccinated. But again, the point is that if you'd started with the antigen rapid or the witness kit, you would have had a lot more trust in this result and not needed to do all the extra testing. Interestingly, this is a cat called Ranger that I dealt with just a few weeks ago, thanks to a colleague in Sydney. This cat initially presented to me for FELV testing, which I'm also interested in, but he'd been very sick and he received a blood transfusion on this day. But they tested him for FIV both before and after the transfusion. And it was fascinating. He tested negative before the transfusion, but on the SNAP combo, positive after the transfusion. So again, I asked for some extra blood. Sure enough, he tested negative on the other 2 kits. And we've tested the donor cat, who turns out to be FIV vaccinated. So again, what I'm saying is if you start with the antigen rapid or the witness kit, you're going to save a lot of confusion. The numbers I showed you before in terms of which antibodies the kits look for, why that's useful is we're trying to work out why this phenomenon is happening. So it's a bit hard to see, but across the top column, the main difference between these 3 kits is that the IDEX kit is looking for a protein called P15, whereas the other 2 kits are looking for 2 different FIV proteins. So one of our suggestions is that this P15 is part of the culprit, and that when cats are vaccinated against FIV, it's this P15 that has an amazing response that the kit can't differentiate. It's probably not that simple though. There's probably some methodological stuff as well. So the different kits, the way they're made, possibly also contributes to why these kits can differentiate. And we're doing some follow-up work to try and work out exactly why some kits can differentiate and other kits can't. But this is the slide I said I can summarise my findings in one simple slide, and that is that screening for FIV infection should begin with the antigen rapid or the witness test kit. It's really hard to argue any other way. In my paper that you can grab online, we have this suggested algorithm for FIV testing. So it's a bit hard to see, but like I said, if you access the paper, it's we think a really clear algorithm. And what's important is that any testing has its faults. No test is 100% perfect. And so we'd always recommend confirmatory testing. But what we found is that if you use the witness and the antigen kit in combination, you would have picked up the right result for these cats in every situation. So our suggestion is that you start with the witness or the antigen kit. If you get a positive result, you repeat it with the other kit. If you get 2 positives, then you can assume this cat is truly infected. If you get 1 of each, so you get a positive and a negative, then you might do PCR testing. And that really changes things because at the moment PCR testing, which is much more expensive than antibody testing, we feel like it's the first line whenever a cat's been vaccinated against FIV. But we're sort of turning that upside down on its head, saying that no, PCR should be really reserved for unusual cases where you have mixed antibody responses. But if you start with these 2 test kits, which are both very affordable, you'll get very, very accurate results. In terms of the vaccine efficacy, this is the other half of my study that I can't wait to present, but that is not for today. This will hopefully be 2017, so please stay tuned for that. I want to acknowledge these studies don't happen without a lot of support. I've been very grateful to Boehringer Ingelheim, who've given funding for the study. All three manufacturers of the test kits, IDEX, Zoetis, and BioNote, were fantastic in giving me a whole stack of kits. And I've also got funding from the ABA and the ASAVA. And finally, thank you for having me. This slide on the bottom right-hand side, hopefully Cindy will recognise, is at the back of UC Davis, where FIV was discovered in 1986. So it should be on anyone's travel plans if they go to UC Davis in Sacramento. Thank you very much.